This is Jan from Boston University, and I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So there are a lot of features with this platform, and I could see the clients that I work with sort of tripping over all the options that they have, and maybe
also talk about
efficiently integrating it into their workflow.
That have already been
The research. Is there any advice about where they might start here and transition to writing a traditional library of code? So migrating some stuff that you start in a notebook to a traditional library, or vice versa. Some sort of organizing principles.
Yeah. So I mean, I'd say it's an iterative process. If I could take a quick shot at answering that, Python is a high-touch language. And the Ipython notebook model, or the Jupyter notebook model, which is not necessarily just Python, people in the R world are very comfortable with using R as an exploratory environment. People who use things like SPSS or SAS or Excel, they're very used to it being exploratory is the starting point. People who use MATLAB, same sort of thing. You do a lot just from the MATLAB command line, as it were, from the MATLAB GUI. Ipython notebooks let you start there, but they give great mechanisms to actually record the work that you're doing, so you can then translate or transfer those bits of code, whether it's in R or in Python or in Julia, into libraries, which then become reused, so that you're then just making callouts and just doing import statements or the equivalent in other languages. And so it really encourages people who see their starting point. I think it also answers one of the questions earlier about I teach people programming starting with Spider. Well, sometimes the starting point is not teaching anybody programming at all. The starting point is you're teaching people how to analyze a problem quantitatively and to generate some aggregated results. Or you're trying to process a bunch of data files, and you're not actually trying to teach somebody how to become a burgeoning computer scientist. You're trying to teach them how to use a tool where what they were doing before was importing things into Excel and dragging and dropping between cells and writing equals sum round bracket statements.
Ian, sorry, you're exactly right. That's exactly what my class is really about: problem solving and figuring out how to morph data into something that they want to see. It's not necessarily really about programming per se.
Ian, also to interrupt, let's go ahead and share your desktop, please.
Just offer some sort of.
Okay, let me just get the app up. Here we are. Sharing.
You do it in Python.
Are we supposed?
Oh, I'm sorry. Is someone else? Fernando, were you providing back an answer?
No, I was just wondering if we were supposed to be seeing something yet.
Potentially.
I know. I'm just sharing mine. I'm just sharing mine now. It says I'm now sharing. Let me just finish this last Seed Gateway. April.
Yeah, I did want to mention very briefly while Ian sets up that the question of how to better bridge between notebooks, exploratory, interactive, developed codes, and what we could call library reusable code is actually a question that we're exploring further. And so in our new proposed funding for the project, we included basically what we could call software engineering from the notebook, which is how can we make the notebook an environment that could actually produce libraries that retain the ability to be explored interactively. I don't think that's a solved problem at all, but we think it's a very interesting one. So I hope in a year or two to have, even though I agree completely with what everything Ian said, I hope in a year or two we'll have some even better answers for this question. That's all I wanted to say.
Well,
we're actively working on it.
Is from Continuum, and Continuum is the Wakari and the Anaconda.
Okay.
Someone there is providing commentary. If they could mute their microphone. I'm glad you know a little bit about Continuum and what we do, but I think everybody on the call is hearing that commentary at the moment.
They invited him, but also.
Yeah, please be on mute if you're not speaking. Yeah, and also go ahead, Ian. Feel free again to interrupt as necessary, but be on mute otherwise.
Okay. Yeah, Marlon, are you able to mute all, or am I able to mute all as a presenter? I don't know if I have that power.
I don't think so. Please go ahead.
I think, well, there's, Martin, I think there's something like *7 or something on the phone that says everybody except the presenter, but, you know.
I want to let people interrupt.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Well, I'll just talk, and hopefully I'll speak loudly enough that everybody can hear. So, very briefly, I was an attendee in this group for many years while I was working as a postdoc at Harvard Medical School, working on large-scale computational workflows for protein structure determination. I was using Open Science Grid for actually the computing piece, but as the workflows stabilized, we were then publishing them, or basically parameterizing those workflows and creating web-based front ends for those workflows. A single run of the primary workflow that I developed produced about 10 million files and around 20 gigs of data, and took anywhere from 4,000 to 10,000 hours. They were big workflows. And so we didn't just let anybody run these, but we had a community of people who, with a very small number of inputs, could run these analytics workflows on X-ray crystallography data to try and do some protein structure determination techniques. The challenge was we were then left, the person who'd done this, usually they would run a single run of this particular analysis technique, and instead we were doing 100,000 runs. And so people were completely unable to even know what the starting point was to understand the results. And so providing the web-based front end for the submission of the workflows, but then importantly, the aggregation of those results and presentation of aggregated results was really important. Ipython notebooks were a key part of the way I did that. And learning ideas and techniques from the community was really important to me as I went through that process building workflows. So that's my brief background. I've spent the last 2 years, after leaving Harvard, I spent the last 2 years at Continuum Analytics. Continuum Analytics is trying to help the world, as my starting slide here says, making data analytics awesome. We want to enable people to leverage the open source tools that are out there. We want to facilitate the development of an ecosystem, and we see the notebook model as a key piece in that. And so we're working with a lot of people right now in academia, in industry, and in the government to effectively leverage a notebook model. So that's kind of the core of the story. We're trying to liberate people from Excel in the 1990s, and a lot of people still live in a world of spreadsheets and Excel. Now, a lot of people poo-poo Excel spreadsheets. The thing is that it gives you effectively a point-and-click graphical data analytics environment and graphical programming environment, even in terms of linking cells and algorithms applied across cells. So people need some of those capabilities, ease of use, interactivity, a combination of data and graphics. The piece that Excel largely falls down on is how you incorporate then the larger story around it.
Yeah, sorry, and let me interrupt again. If please go on mute. Please mute person.
Browser.
All right.
Infrastructure data.
All right. If you have any idea who this is speaking, can you tell them somehow to interrupt offline? Okay. Thank you.
Put a message on your presentation because maybe they have our call on mute and he can only see the slides.
Sure thing. I could do that.
Sorry, that may have been us. I didn't realize that you guys were open to input. We're going to mute.
No, we're open to input, but please interrupt and ask the question to the speaker.
Okay, hopefully you've got everyone on mute now. All right. So we want to enable collaborative data analytics, and the big thing is that everybody should be able to show and tell their data analytics story. That's what we want to enable. And we think that the notebook model is really effective because it brings together the narrative, the data, graphics and visualization, and the code piece. Although it starts off from the code piece, in fact, the people we're working with, the parts that are most valuable is not so much the code, although the ability to capture these notebook sessions in notebook files, which can then be published, shared, iterated on, is very important. In fact, in a lot of the places that we're seeing, the narrative piece, the interaction with the data and the access to the data and and the visuals are a very important part. Incorporating high quality visualizations that are easy to create is something which we're working on through the open source bouquet library that has a notebook plugin, but Ipython notebooks, because they inline the graphics, makes it very, very easy for people to produce the visuals that go along with their code so you can see it all in one place. The reproducibility is a key thing. Again, Fernando mentioned this, in that you have a record of what people have been doing. They're not just in their local Ipython history files. The actual notebook file has a history of the operations that have been done to produce a particular set of results, because they're all encapsulated and embedded in that. We've implemented a few extensions that were, as they stabilize, we're hoping to be able to open source in the next couple months. Other people are working on these as well that give you the ability to go beyond notebook checkpointing, which is something that Ipython notebooks already provide, to actually provide easy integration with a revision control system. And so we've got an extension that will save on notebook saves. You actually get a git commit happening. So every time you save the notebook, you're able to actually be taking a versioned snapshot of that notebook into a revision control system that has username, timestamp, commit message, these kinds of things. So reproducibility is important beyond just science. It's important in across industry, whether we're talking about people in engineering fields or in financial services or in pharmaceuticals or in people who are working in climate modeling, weather prediction, all sorts of different areas. The reproducibility is essential. What we're seeing with Ipython notebooks is the ability to have something that there's been effort in for a long time to have this electronic notebook for science. So across the board, you've got engineers, scientists, people who are working in ways where a lot of their processes are recorded on paper. Well, there's a whole industry trying to support provenance and reproducibility, whether it's just for best practice for the organization or whether it's because they're actual statutory requirements, whether they're from the FDA or the SEC or whoever it may be, actually keeping track of what have people done to come up with a particular model or with a particular set of results, with some aggregated data or with a particular graphic that's been produced. So Ipython notebooks give you that ability when the people who are doing the work, they're not thinking that I'm writing a library or I'm writing a computer program. What they think is, I've got some data, I need to analyze it, or I have a process that I need to go through and I need a record of that process. The publication piece, Fernando mentioned the NB Viewer, and so NB Viewer provides a number of different channels by which Ipython notebooks can be published to the world, leverages GitHub gists, so it's very easy for people to produce these things. We have, Continuum has produced a free service called Binstar. So binstar.org is a mechanism for people to be able to publish namespaced, access-controlled code and data artifacts. And just now we are incorporating the ability to publish notebooks into there so that you've got some mechanism which is more accessible for somebody who doesn't see themselves as a software engineer to be able to publish their notebook work and then share that with a controlled group of people, versioned, access controlled, namespaced, along with the dependencies. But that's actually an important piece that ties together both the reproducibility part with the publication part, is that these notebooks, the snapshotted views of them are great, but sometimes they're going to have, it's not clear what the actual operational environment was where the notebook was produced. So there's two angles for how we at Continuum see that problem can be attacked. One is provide a centralized environment that a group of collaborating people are all using. So they're running off of the same system. Instead of running Ipython notebooks on their local system, they're running off of a centralized system. Jupyter is a big step. Jupyter is providing that. Continuum has had a commercial product for a couple of years, which provides that in our own way, but we're shifting to simply encouraging our clients to adopt Jupyter and working with them in a transition plan to have a centralized platform where a whole group of collaborating people can be running their notebook kernels and then accessing the same notebook server, that you're leveraging the same underlying infrastructure, same software versions. You get the cluster computing capacity, you get all the centralized same set of data, you're not replicating the data, and then you have better control over the provenance through the centralization of that. So that's one angle to the issue of reproducibility based on the environment that the notebooks are run in. Another is Continuum has developed a language-neutral, platform-neutral packaging model around the Conda packaging model, and we have some strategies that can be used with Ipython notebooks, that an Ipython notebook can actually specify its set of dependencies so that you get not just a notebook file with a snapshot of a record of what's been done with the data and the narrative and the graphics and the code, but also you have the information embedded in that notebook's metadata saying you need these 5 packages for this to work and their dependencies, or you need these 5 packages and this specific version of them. And so that can become an important part of being able to reproduce the environment so that you can run those notebooks on your own. Collaboration, again, Jupyter is providing mechanisms. Jupyter Hub is providing mechanisms to facilitate collaboration. We see within Continuum, collaboration is bigger than just notebooks. You've got a group of people collaborating around a piece of analytics work. Some of those people in a cross-functional team don't know any R or Julia or Python, and they never plan to, but they understand the domain. They know how to look at the data. They can read the results. They can interpret aggregated results and graphics. And so they need to be able to look at and share the artifacts of the research. There's some models that we're working with in our portal-based environment that facilitates that. Interactivity is a big deal. There's widgets, widget model that allows interactivity in the notebooks that is very powerful. So every running notebook can actually be its own little instance of an interactive app that you can play with. But there are other models that are possible, and on the right-hand side of the screen here, there's just some screenshots of me showing off some work I did over a year ago, just very brief, but other people have extended this to say, well, what if we take a notebook and we parameterize that notebook, and we say these are the inputs to the notebook, and provided you define those well, then you can automate the mechanism of the construction of a form for the input of those parameters, validate those parameters, and then you can run that notebook without ever having to look at or modify the code cells. And you can do that in almost a CGI style model. So you can do a single instance invocation and then get the results back. So you don't need to have a running Python kernel for every single person who's interacting with a particular notebook app, as it were. Instead, it can be more asynchronous: invoke, get the results, return the results. Process is over. So you don't have a persisted process for every person interacting. And then the results produced by that are simply the static results pushed out by an invocation of that notebook without the code cells, effectively. And that's sort of what you're looking at in the bottom right of this screen here. So we only have a couple minutes for questions. So I'm going to wrap up saying, what we're trying to create is a Python-centric analytics nirvana. That's Continuum Analytics view of the world. We think that the notebook model is very, very powerful for today's data scientists, and we think there are lots of opportunities for how they can be leveraged inside of portals and gateways. So people, everybody who's on this call, if you're on this call and you're interested in that domain, they can be a very, very powerful mechanism to enable access for people who never want to learn about an SSH key, never want to see a command line themselves, can either be using notebooks as a model to access the gateway's underlying infrastructure or domain, or possibly having notebooks as a model to view workflows and have the ability to have a execute only, not a writable notebook, but an executable notebook. There's lots and lots of opportunities that exist around this. It's very exciting, and I think it's the kind of thing, well, I know it's the kind of thing, actually, I would say, that is really going to be shaping the way the Xseed Gateways community, the user base of people who are trying to connect with anybody who's interested in the top of the Xseed Gateways, they are all going to be affected by this model, whether directly or indirectly. So that's me and my view. I've got my last slide here is just some contact details if anybody wants to talk further, but hopefully we can leave a few minutes for some questions for Fernando and I about notebooks, notebook models, and gateways, interaction for access to high-performance computing infrastructure.
Thanks, Ian, and thanks also to Fernando. So we'll leave it open for questions. So I know we only have a couple of minutes left, but some of this is due to my mismanagement of the AT conference. So do we have any questions?
Sure, this is George again. I have a couple.
Yeah, go ahead.
One is, and maybe Ian and you and I should talk further on something. I'm interested in thinking about how to redesign my class a little bit to use Ipython, well, to use notebooks, but then I have to think about server space and stuff like that. The other question, though, I have is, on the question of high-performance computing, how do you see this fitting into the Xseed framework?
So I think that the Xseed framework could be providing could be providing something like Jupyter Hub, should be experimenting with providing Jupyter Hub as a front-end access point to lots of the infrastructure. So people, instead of, so one of the things is interactivity. You get interactivity with these Ipython notebooks. Ipython notebooks can then provide, can be configured in such a way that they've got the blanks that you just need to fill in, that behind the scenes are going to go and do the Q-sub for you. And so it can massively simplify what we're looking for. Our idea of creating gateways, I think, has been shaped by seeing web-based interactivity that looks like what Facebook does or what Google does. For the communities that we're working with, they'll probably be very happy with something which is much, maybe less functionality, less published, but much more flexible, and that can be iterated on much more quickly, can be modified, updated, corrected if there's problems very, very quickly. I've worked with a lot of the different gateway infrastructures that have been created, or portal infrastructures that are out there. They were all really tough to use. They were all really tough to build gateways around. The end results looked great. It was a huge upfront effort. If instead you imagine creating access to a particular workflow or analytics routine is as simple as writing an Ipython notebook for it and then having a mechanism by which you can publish that notebook in a accessible, runnable, sandboxed way on top of a particular Xseed computing center, that's amazing. That's such a huge enabler.
Fernando, do you want to comment too, and also point out to people on the should look at the chat for a couple of links that you just posted.
Yeah, so I'll briefly mention those comment on those links. Ian's answer was excellent. I just want to mention that the first is a blog post by a student at Berkeley, a grad student at UC Berkeley, who's been working very closely with us and who is using the Jupyter Hub hosted on Rackspace hardware to teach a class for about 220 students. It's a graduate course. I think it's an undergraduate course on computational models of cognition, statistical models of cognition. And that blog post is a very detailed technical description of what she did. It's a little complex because she was doing it for the first time, but the point of blogging about it was basically to explain how it was done and to find ways of streamlining it even further. The third link that I posted is a hosted solution that exists, which is a commercial product out of a startup from the University of Washington to basically provide not only Ipython, but actually related environments such as Sage and actually LaTeX editing and other tools hosted in the cloud. It's something that you may want to look at. They've been working on it for about 2 years on building that product. And finally, in terms of gateways, what I wanted to mention is that as part of my job at Lawrence Berkeley Lab, I work on a project called KBase, which is a DOE-funded gateway for computational biology, basically for microbial genomic analysis, single organism genomic analysis, and plant metabolic modeling and plant biology. That precisely tries to connect large-scale data sets in biology, large-scale computational resources from the DOE national labs, and all of it is done through an interface where when you log in, the actual runtime interface that the scientists see is a hosted version of Ipython. And I'd be happy to talk further about how the DOE views that program and how that can relate to NSF programs.
Are the links supposed to be in the chat window? I don't see anything there. Yeah.
I don't see anything either.
I don't see those links either, unfortunately. I think it might need to be changed to all. I think you have to chat them to all.
I'm very sorry. Let me just post again.
Yeah.
I just put a link to my slide. There's not a lot of content in them. They're more just visual, but I put a link to my slides in there. Thanks, Fernando. We can see those.
I didn't know how to use the thing. Sorry.
This is Jan from BU, and I just wanted to say that I use Ipython Notebooks to teach my Python tutorials here, and we don't host the notebooks at all. For people that want to use their laptops, it's pretty straightforward for them to use Miniconda or Anaconda to get the Ipython notebook technology, the base Python. And then we just sort of host our notebooks, and they download it, and they work from there. We have some desktops, too, that we've got stuff pre-installed. The question that I had was, has there been any work into getting shared notebooks in the way that you might see Google Docs, where you have two users both editing a notebook at the same time and maybe commenting on the side? I wasn't sure if that was a feature that was discussed or in the works or whatever.
I actually have a postdoc right now who's funded by Google, and who's working with me at UC Berkeley and is working directly with Google engineers, and we're building exactly that right now. Yes, and it's actually directly, the funding comes straight up from Google.
That'd be great.
Other questions?
This is Don again. NCAR, we have several petabytes of archival climate and weather data that we make available to the community, and a lot of that involves to really use it effectively, you really need to do aggregation across all of those. But presumably, if you have a language and or a server that provides the abstraction across all the tens of thousands of files that really go into like a model of the Earth, then you would presumably be able to build a kernel for that language, or and or use an aggregation server. Somebody mentioned that they had used it for climate before, so I was thinking of creative ways of, being able to provide a notebook environment that could reach into these massive simulation runs and just pull out little bits and chunks.
Yeah.
So
John, that's it. That's it. We've worked with people from the NASA, one of the PODAC groups, and also from NOAA on exactly that issue and techniques by which notebooks can be an entry point to access that data. So it's more than just portals for data query, but portals which can be data query coupled with the computational piece. And with one of the other, not on this topic of notebooks, but one of the other open source projects that Continuum is initiated and is working on very hard, we've got the Blaze libraries, and the Blaze libraries could be really valuable to talk to you more about.
That'd be cool. If you have any URLs you can post on that, and it sounds like Marlon's going to be gathering up some of those, that would be fantastic. Like I said, I want to send some information on this out to quite a few people.
So I just posted two examples. A little while back, we did, in collaboration with folks at the DoD, we demonstrated how to, using the combination of the Ipython notebook and the Ipython parallel libraries, to embed an interactive IPython cluster inside of a large-scale MPI run that in this case was running on about a 500 node run for fluid flow simulation, and then connect to it from the notebook to do interactive monitoring and actually interactive steering of the large parallel run from the comfort of a notebook client running on a laptop at home. So the simulation was running back in the supercomputer, and then there was a client connection open to a laptop at home that would let you monitor and play with the data locally, write a report while the simulation was ongoing without having to do any weird trying to add GUI libraries to the supercomputing code, which is a nightmare. So I posted those two links. These are part of our standard example collection in Ipython.
Okay. Well, I've got those now. So very cool. I have to go to another meeting. Thank you, though, for a really great presentation and some intriguing information.
Thank you.
Do we have other questions?
Not really a question, but this is Nancy at SDSC. I just learned yesterday that somebody here, Andrea Zonko, is working on an Ipython notebook that interfaces to Exceed, that kind of runs on the Gordon front end and launches jobs and things like that. So that might be something to hear about at a future one of these calls. I don't know. I think he works also at NERSC. I don't know if you know him, Fernando. You've heard that name before.
Can you repeat the name of the person?
Yeah, Andrea Zonka, Zonca.
Well, I didn't know he was at NERSC. He has popped up on our mailing list quite often, but I've never met him before.
Yeah, no, he's an employee here at SDSC, but I know he also does some Ipython work at NERSC with machines there. And so when you mentioned that K-based gateway, I wasn't sure.
Well, one thing I want to mention is that I am going to be in San Diego giving a couple of talks and having some meetings in May. So if you shoot me an email, maybe we might be able to arrange to at least briefly talk while I'm there at UCSD.
Yep, sounds good. Sounds good. Yeah, I caught one of Brian Granger's talks when he was here at the Computer Science seminar series recently, and yeah, equally good as the ones for the really compelling stuff. I totally agree with Ian Stokes' recent comments too. Ping you offline on some of that, Ian. Okay, sounds good. I'll send you a mail. Thanks, Fernando.
Thank you.
Other questions? Last call. All right, Fernando, Ian, I thank you a lot for your time today. And we had to compress a lot of information here, and unfortunately, also I only have the second half recorded. So, Fernando, I'd like to work with you to find another time to give a longer presentation and get that recorded, hopefully.
Yeah, certainly, no problem. And I mean, all of this material, fortunately, is publicly available, and I've given a number of talks that are recorded on video, so it's not super hard to find it, and on GitHub it's also there. But I'm certainly happy to do it again or do it with a different focus.
Thanks, Marlon. It was a pleasure.
All right. Thanks a lot.
And thanks to you. It was great hearing from your side. I always find it very, very healthy and informative to kind of hear how other people have a take on what we're doing. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Right. We'll do this again in 2 weeks.
Okay. Thanks, Marlon, for the organization. See you, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.